Hey, Brett.
How you doing today? Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. It's been a
I'm
little
Brett Starr, the CEO and founder of the Starr Conspiracy. He's Lance Hahn, the Vice President of Market Insights for the Starr Conspiracy. And we're here to talk about all things employee experience. And today, we're mostly going to talk about Southwest Airlines as a lens into work experience, which is one subdomain of employee experience. As a refresher, when we talk about employee experience is one domain of three experience domains. There's employee experience, there's customer experience, and there's shareholder experience. There are 5 subdomains in our model of employee experience. There is employer brand, recruitment marketing, candidate experience, work experience, and employee success. And of all the things that we talk about, the area that is incredibly significant but least understood is the distinction between work experience and employee success. Increasingly, work tech, human resources, all the different disciplines that kind of circle around human resources are growing to incorporate work experience, which is different than employee success. Employee success are all of the things that allow people to bring their full selves to work, to live a fulfilled life. Think about employee recognition, well-being, et cetera, et cetera. Work experience is anything that actually touches the work. Yeah. And that includes software tools. And so you see HR people getting much more involved in the selection of software, not just traditionally HR software like performance management suites, but also project planning tools, anything that actually, the productivity suites that we live in every day, because it's so impactful on the employee experience. And here is an example with Southwest Airlines, one of the biggest, most public meltdowns of an airline in U.S. history, all caused by what? Let's discuss. Lance Hahn, what's going on out there?
Yeah, let's talk about some work technology here. And some of the most ancient stuff is crew scheduling for airlines. And so if you ever known anybody that's worked for an airline, you've probably heard they got lots of ancient systems. They're still, some of their systems are still running on those like black, monitors with green text. Those things. And so yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about that. Some software that's a couple decades old could take down an airline, not just for like a couple days, but disrupted things for like a week.
Yeah.
Past like where everybody else was like just back to running like normal, they were like still struggling.
Yeah. Billions of dollars of damage.
Yep.
Invited the scrutiny of the federal government.
Yeah. It's not good when the transportation secretary is on the Sunday morning shows, like talking about like, we're going to figure out what happened here.
Yeah.
Like, well, all right. Only the lawyers are excited about that one.
Yeah.
But yeah, anybody who's been in HR, who's been in some sort of scheduling, capacity knows, like, whenever you've done, I worked in retail for a little bit, so I understand a little bit about like scheduling software and that sort of thing. And so, it's not nearly as complex as what the airlines are, but when even something as simple as, scheduling shifts for, coverage at a retail store goes wrong, what a pain in the ass it is to just pull out the graph paper and start filling out shifts for people by hand. And then you just take that to a level of complexity times 1,000 with the airlines, and you have a real big mess. And so, yeah, we talk about this, in my newsletter. I also connected it to the customer experience, because that's something that Southwest has been known for, as long as they've been like a national name, they've been known for, having that great customer experience, and just how quickly that promise could go away.
Yeah. And specifically, and we talk about breaks in continuity between experience domains, and also breaks in continuity between the subdomains of a single experience domain. And that's what causes all your problems, right? Yep. And so Southwest Airlines, an iconic airline, known for customer service, and their customer service broke in a profound way, driven by employee experience issues, primarily the work experience and the tools that people are using to get the basics of work done. And so I want to spend a little bit of time on that and then talk about scheduling software specifically, because scheduling software, in my opinion, represents such a significant opportunity for employee experience in general, including things that people don't really talk about when they talk about scheduling software, which is DEI. And I'll kind of get to that in a moment. But, when you think about work experience as a subdomain of employee experience, here's a tool that Southwest Airlines uses to create their schedules, right? And, and all, by the way, the airline industry suffers from tech debt to
huge amounts.
Just incredible. You go out to the, like the desk and ask, someone a question, and they type for 15 minutes. And then they have to ask someone to come over and they're like, wait, how do you do this? And they're like, oh, you have to hit shift, command, asterisk, F1. And then you have to hit caret, and then backspace. And then you have this screen and this screen. It's like, what the hell are y'all talking about? They got
the cheat sheets on like the keyboards for all the commands. Yeah. It's crazy.
They need those like NFL wristbands to have like the little, cause they're like so notoriously bad. So you think about all this tech debt.
Yeah.
And tech debt, would fit under work experience.
Yep.
And under employee experience. Think about the impact that has on employees and how shitty it must be to have to use those really terrible systems day in and day out that actually creates so much friction at work. And then is there a more tangible example of the impact of employee experience on customer experience? Because customers are already pissed off when they're traveling most of the time.
Yeah.
Unless you're like a road warrior.
That's right.
Who, just adopts that, unbearable lightness of being when traveling.
Yeah. Puts on their like noise canceling headphones and just lives their life. Like,
and just expects delays. And it's like, oh yeah. Oh, here it goes. 5 minutes delayed. Well, we can expect that it's going to be another 10, another 20, another, and then
that's right.
3 or 4 hours.
I'll go get a bagel.
Yeah. Go get a vodka.
Yeah.
You get a bagel, I'll get a vodka.
There we go. I mean, it's so like, I mean, I think the thing with Southwest is I think the crux of some of the issues was one, crews had to schedule through a phone-based scheduling tool. So like they called in, not text, not like phone, like they called the number. So like when she hits a fan, like they're getting busy signals. And, obviously, Southwest got just killed on like all media, social media, traditional media, everything, for like losing people's bags, not knowing where planes were, not knowing where customers. Well, they did know where their employees were. Like you talk about like building trust with employees. It's sort of like, when we think about breaks in continuity of the employee experience, like when you have great faith in your employer, that they know where you are. That's number one, that they're not going to strand you, especially if they're an airline. That's usually a good thing. Like you start to, that doesn't lead to a great customer. That doesn't translate into a great customer experience for the people that these guys are serving. So it's really, so when you're using those archaic systems, I think there's like some level of acceptance to a certain extent, but then when things like this happen, it just it's really a snowball effect that goes downhill quick.
You brought ice, I'll bring fire. We talk about this all the time. When a fire starts an employee experience, it eventually grows to engulf all experience domains. Customer experience is obvious.
Yeah.
Typically, the impact on shareholder experience is not obvious, but in this case, it's incredibly obvious because Southwest Airlines is going to get popped from a profit and revenue perspective. I mean, people are pissed.
Yeah.
And that all started by not giving employees the right tools to drive their work experience, right?
Yeah, and you're talking about again a consistent customer experience, a consistent employee experience. Well, one of the most consistent shareholder experiences is in a really volatile market. I mean, I think I looked it up and, Southwest gross profit has been in the positive for like more than a decade, except for 3 quarters in 2020 when everybody was losing their pants. But literally, I mean, like literally one of the safest bets.
Yep.
In the aviation industry.
And broadly considered one of the most successful companies in history in terms of, counterintuitive business models, starting with employees, starting with customers.
That's right.
And driving great business results accordingly. But, here's a period where, I think the entire travel industry is trying to take advantage of, a resurgence in travel, high demand. You see airlines posting record profits because of the surge in demand. But you also see all of these labor issues from, pilots to flight attendants to call centers, et cetera, et cetera. And, there's a lot of externalities that, can't be controlled for, one might say, although I don't believe that. But, that's going to be there's the labor market. There's this, there's that. Well, okay, fine. So let's just agree to disagree. But you say you can't control for that. But here are some things that you can control for. And, Southwest Airlines has about 60,000 employees, and they're calling in to a phone line. Right. And it's like, press 1 if you are stranded in, like Iowa.
That's right.
No offense to Iowa. But,
no, yeah, it's absolutely. So, I think one of the challenges, I think, we've obviously specialized in work tech for such a long time. And, I always, when I introduce myself, I introduce the company I work for, kind of what we do and what we focus on. They're like, that doesn't sound very interesting. But then like stuff like this comes up. It's like, this stuff actually matters, having a scheduling software that works, that can, especially with a industry that's routinely disrupted by, weather. They had a ground stop a few weeks ago too, that was driven by some software issues for air traffic control. Like, it's just a disruptive business. And so like there's a level of like having technology that sort of scales and deals with those disruptions, and having a business model that does so too. So yeah, scheduling software is kind of boring until it doesn't work anymore. And then it's really, really interesting.
Well, and it's boring also because the work tech industry doesn't care about it.
Right.
It's like, it's not white collar. It's not sexy. So it doesn't get the attention that, like employee experience solutions get. But here's the, the big picture. Yeah. Scheduling is vital to a much larger chunk of the workforce than, a lot of the fancy software that we talk about all the time.
That's right.
Rule number 1 is the shit's got to work.
Yeah.
It just has to work. And sure, if your, scheduling system is 10 or 15 years old, it might have some problems and some tech debt, but this is not rocket science. The scheduling software that's out today can deal with weather. It can deal with disruptions in supply chain. It can deal with labor shortages. It can deal with all that stuff because technology has changed a lot in the last decade.
A little bit. Yeah,
so
a little bit.
Number 1, it has to work. But number 2, there are all these things that scheduling software can achieve that other software categories cannot. So I use this example all the time, and it's a real head scratcher for me, why more people don't see, this potential in scheduling software. If you want to talk about DEI, most people, it's just like activism, right? Like most people get activated by a personal experience, right? So if you have bias, whether it's unconscious bias or conscious bias, you're not likely to change your worldview until you have been immersed in someone else's worldview, until you have worked alongside someone of a different gender, a different color, a different, religious belief, whatever, right? And so where does the rubber meet the road in terms of people from diverse backgrounds getting together and learning about each other in a productive environment where stuff gets done? At work, being scheduled. Yet many of these scheduling solutions have taken self-service to the extreme, where people can basically work the scheduling system to not only select their own schedules, but also to team with people so that they can schedule themselves with a group of people that they like to work with, right?
Yeah.
And that's great. But what often, happens in a lot of environments is you see that the schedules are, it's almost like set up like, I'm going to say something that I'll probably get dinged for. But it's almost like segregation. Like people are self-selecting or being put into groups of people who look a lot like them. And therefore, it's like you walk into this shift or you walk into that other shift and the composition of the workforce looks really different, despite the fact that on paper, the DEI statistics look really good. But in the way that work gets done in a 3-shift environment, there's a lot more segregation a lot less diversity in the actual daily work rhythm. And I feel like, scheduling software can be at the front lines of DEI initiatives by taking into consideration how teams are put together to unlock all the benefits of having a diverse team working together. And I think so often we look at DEI as a high level set of board metrics that are about the overall population and composition of the workforce. But that doesn't really mean that there is inclusion in that environment. And it doesn't really mean that DEI objectives for the greater good are actually being achieved. And I feel like scheduling software, first of all, has to work, but second, has a higher purpose and an untapped potential for all kinds of stuff.
I mean, that's really interesting because I think of a lot of these sort of have been traditionally back office types of software that really operationalize the the larger strategy for the organization, the priorities. Like this is where the rubber meets the road on a lot of this stuff. So like how you prioritize D&I, how you prioritize safety in manufacturing environments. Like, are you putting the right shift composition together to get the safest outcomes? All that stuff, yes, the scheduling software has to just work at a base level, but does it also help you achieve some of your higher goals as an organization? That can only be done by actually deploying people at the right place, at the right time, with the right group of people, understanding those group dynamics, being contextually aware of what else you have out there. That's a good point. I don't think a lot of people really think about it like that. I think they just think about does this make my life a little bit easier than pulling out the graph paper and start mapping things out? If so, great.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it, you know more about this than I do, but I think it must come down to who makes the decision about scheduling software and do they have any power inside the organization? So I relate it to benefits. It's well known that especially in large organizations, especially with self-insured populations, there's the HR, there's usually some sort of centralized HR group. And then there's business partners that go back and forth between sites and stuff like that. And there's kind of multiple, if you take that mothership of HR, there's going to be multiple, big groups, but probably the two dominant groups on the one side, you've got talent, and on the other side, you've got total compensation.
Yep.
And total compensation is usually going to be compensation and benefits administration, right? And then over in that benefits component, those are the folks who are working with, the insurance industrial complex to, the brokers and the carriers and, all that stuff to, kind of figure out what the benefits strategy should be. And then you've got corporate wellness tucked in there that is really aimed at basically reducing healthcare costs by targeting interventions to the high-risk population.
Yep.
There's so much more that well-being could do. There's so much more. If you, just shifted the focus a little bit away from only cutting costs with, by focusing interventions on the high-risk population, if you rather said, hey, let's focus on all of employees and make sure that we're providing them with what they need, meeting them where they are so that they don't have conditions that manifest in chronic conditions that need treatment later, then you'd be doing a lot more good that would have an impact on your employee experience, your customer experience, your shareholder experience. But unfortunately, the people who make the decisions about corporate wellness are like 5 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from the CHRO, right? And talent has a lot of the power. I feel like the same is true for the people who represent, the frontline workers inside large organizations. And so when you get, a situation like employee scheduling, the notion that you could bring employee scheduling into the broader employee experience conversation, like we just, talked about why scheduling is critical to employee experience, but who can make that case inside a company that has the clout to get it on the CHRO's, radar in a way that's in the narrative of EX as opposed to just, hey, this shit needs to work.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, I think, you look at scheduling I think you're right. I mean, so there's a level of being myopic or just, solely focused on just sort of making your job better. I think there are people in the benefit space that do sort of see the higher purpose of what they're trying to do too. So I don't want to, I don't want to minimize those folks out there because they're definitely out there, especially if you go to the Health Benefits Leadership Conference and that sort of thing. You see them there. But I mean, just all these sort of niche roles, they're kind of really, those are sort of the unicorns out there. And I think if you look at, crew scheduling at airlines, for instance, is oftentimes a system operations or system admin function that isn't connected to HR at all.
Yeah.
So you've got a bunch of people that are looking for efficient systems that are looking, they're seen truly as just a cost center. And so I'm sure in Southwest's case, it was super easy just to look at, okay, this thing has been, working for however many years, decades. And, we know how disruptive this change will be. And sort of if it's not broken, don't fix it.
Yeah.
And, having sort of a sysadmin group that's responsible for that has to just sort of navigate, making a business case for that and talking about just something that isn't about making their lives a little bit easier, making their crew lives a little bit easier, but talking about a bigger, brand impact, employee experience impact, customer experience impact. I mean, those are all things that really, really require somebody, a little bit higher than those folks to really take that on and believe that that's true and make those arguments and sort of create those through lines, those connection points that can't be done at that level.
Yeah. And that kind of brings me, I think, to the big picture, which is, we're talking about employee experience. In this particular case, we're talking about work experience as a subdomain of employee experience. And also we're talking about the contagion of a bad employee experience in terms of its impact on customer experience and shareholder experience. But, it's okay, well, what do you do about it? What is experience anyway, right? So employee experience is simply the perception of the quality of time spent with a company. Was it a good use of my time? Was it valuable for me? Did I get something out of it? And it's a perception. And the perception, implies that there is no single reality. Realities are always relative to, other realities or whatever, but it's the perception of the quality of time, spent with an organization. That's the same with customer experience and with shareholder experience, perception of the quality of time spent with the company. That's all experience is. So where does that perception come from? It comes from defining moments. It comes from defining experiences in the day-to-day. And every time you interact with a system, or you interact with a person, or you interact with a place, or you interact with anything about a company, it's either adding to or taking away from your perception of the quality of time spent with that company. If you want to create a great employee experience, you have to consider all of these touch points and all of these defining moments. And it's certainly a defining moment when you contemplate the systems that people live in and the systems that people use to get the core work done of their business and of their position. And if you want to create a great employee experience, You need to think holistically from the employee's perspective about the systems that are being used day in and day out that are inescapable, and whether that's adding to or detracting from the perception of the quality of time spent with your company. And I have no doubt that if someone at Southwest said, well, let's put ourselves in our employees' shoes and let's go hang out with them and watch them use these systems. Let's hang out with them when they pick up the phone and try to schedule, because, that they would say, holy shit, this is really detracting from what used to be one of the greatest employee experiences in the world. And we need to do something about this.
That's right.
And this notion that, like, okay, if we flip that switch and we take care of that tech debt, it's going to cost X amount and have Y impact on our share price. That's what happens when you bring a shareholder experience perspective to an employee experience party.
Yeah.
You fuck it up. In that situation, shareholder value has to be a constraint, right? You go in and you fix the problem that's an employee experience problem with the constraint that you can't, lose money or deteriorate
money on it. Yeah, exactly.
But you don't flip that and say, okay, from a shareholder perspective, what should we do here? Well, fuck, let's squeeze 5 more years out of that, scheduling software.
Let's do it, because we know it's going to be, it's going to be, tens of millions of dollars to do this switch. So, it's kind of like my HVAC unit in my house. It's 30 years old. Like, can I get through another season with it? It's for us, it's kind of a low stakes thing, because we know we could get a replacement like pretty quickly, as long as it's not the middle of summer. We've got options. We got a basement, those sorts of things. So, but it's just like, it's taking very much that mentality. One question I have for you, Brett, talk about defining moments. Like, anybody who worked at Southwest during the end of 2022 is going to remember this moment, like when shit hit the fan, right? Can you use those shared moments as sort of almost like a fraternity hazing sort of like shared experience to say, like, wow, that sucked. We made it through it though. Like, is there a way for an organization? Because I've got a view on this, but I'm kind of curious about, like, there's also power in like a shared experience that, like, usually defining moments are like, very individualized. This is like one that's just sort of like, if you were here at the end of 2022, we were all going through it. Is there some value in a turnaround effort that sort of focuses on that almost?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's a couple of things that stand out immediately about it. First of all, you kind of hinted at this earlier in the conversation, but you said one of the barriers to switching solutions is the change management associated with it. Like, people don't like change. It'll be a disruption, et cetera, et cetera. And that's true. But a situation like this gives you the ability to rally everyone around a shared purpose to make the changes that are necessary towards driving the business forward.
Yeah.
And so if you were putting off this software adoption because, your engagement survey is telling you that people have change fatigue, and, we've been through a difficult period over the last, 2 years, and we can't throw a big systems change on top of this, et cetera, et cetera. This creates a true burning platform, because it really is, to come in and say, look, we need to change in order to maintain the standards of Southwest Airlines. We never want to have this happen again. We want to, emblazon this in our memories as what goes wrong when we fear change or when we don't stay ahead of the technology curve. We're never going to allow that to happen again. Let's all rally around this and take Southwest Airlines and to the what are we? What century in? The 22nd century?
I think we're in the 21st century still.
We're still in the 21st?
I think so.
I feel like I've woken up from like a cryogenic freeze or something. Okay, we're in the 21st century.
Still 21st century. We're actually getting to the 21st century now.
Yeah,
with their
okay.
software, at least.
Yeah, all right. So let's bring Southwest Airlines into the 24th century, and we need everybody to do it. 25th century. And so, I think that's, one area. I think generally speaking, from the other area of creating, basically a shared obstacle to overcome, I think that's another great opportunity. People think this about Southwest Airlines. We know this about ourselves. Now let's go out and prove it to the world.
Yeah.
I think that's another great opportunity. But the one thing that I would say underpinning all of this is, especially in the 90s, somewhat in the 2000s, people made up burning platforms to try to motivate employees.
That's right.
And that's a really shitty thing to do. So it has to have the additional benefit of being true, right? Like if you have a burning platform, it better really be a burning platform, or people are going to see through that, right? So that's number one. And number two, if you're rallying, someone around a shared purpose, you better have the intent to actually achieve it.
Yeah.
Meaning that Southwest Airlines has a lot of work to do. This only surfaces issues that were simmering, kind of below the surface for a long time, right? And if they're not really interested in moving their employee experience multiple clicks forward, if they're not really interested in modernizing their tech stack, then they shouldn't create a false rally point.
That's right.
So no fake burning platforms, no false rally points. And in the absence of those, then I think it can be used to the benefit of the organization and the people. I mean, it can be a real re-energizing experience.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Reminds me of the Michael Jordan Hall of Fame speech where he just listed off all the people that were that underestimated him, which honestly had to be 3 total people when he was 12, maybe but it was all headcanon for him. He was just it was in his head. That's what was motivating him. But I think it's a great point about that. I think a lot of the commentary I've seen about Southwest is just sort of hey, almost have a short memory about this. And I actually think have a long memory about this. Make sure if you're actually committed, and I think they are, because they've been doing this for more than I think 3 decades now. If you really believe in your mission of being one of the most customer centric, employee centric companies in the world, that's who you are. And things like that don't happen to companies that are truly like that. So you take that long memory, and I love that idea of using it as a license to say we put this off too long. That's our bad. We're never going to let something like that happen again. So not only are we going to fix this sort of stuff, but we're going to take a total look at we're going to audit our tech stack. We're going to take a different approach to making sure that we're staying up to date and making sure our systems are just more, reliable and more resilient to some of the challenges that are always going to be facing our industry. And then, I think, I think they're getting rightfully, taking over the coals. And so you think about all of the different airlines that have had issues over, the past, especially in the last couple decades. And you're boy, we are being really harsh on Southwest. I think that's actually a credit to, how far ahead Southwest was on all this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
If Spirit Airlines goes down for a week, you're well, no shit. I think that stuff is all just put together by baling twine and, duct tape. No surprise they went down. If somebody United has a big outage in Denver, you're just that makes sense. This doesn't make sense. So I think that big continuity break is really, really challenging. And so, there's a risk to having that high, that high consistency is when you don't deliver on it. It really knocked them off their pedestal really quickly. Whereas another airline had the benefit of not being that high to begin with. And so knocking them down a couple notches is going to be a big deal to those folks.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed it. The reason why this is such a big story is because it's such an obvious break in the promise that Southwest has made to employees, to customers, and to shareholders. And I'll also say that it's the thing that's going to get them out of all this.
That's right.
Staying true to that vision. And when you have a strong vision, it's just like Disney. When Disney, their promise is basically to create happiness. That's their whole experience vision. When they are perceived as breaking their promise of being the happiest place on earth, that's when they get dinged and it always brings them back.
Yeah.
You know, it's the thing that kills them, and it's the thing that brings them back every time. So when they laid off tons of people during the pandemic, and the way they laid people off was really bad, they got beat up, and all the headlines said the happiest place on earth is not so happy anymore.
That's right.
And then they swing, they always come back because they stay true to that vision.
That's right.
Now you've got the CEO of Disney saying you need to come back to the office, right? That's the latest thing with Disney. Is that the happiest place on earth? Probably not.
4 days a week.
Yeah, probably not.
That's right.
And so they're probably going to get beat up a little bit about that because it's an implicit violation of the promise that they make in creating happiness. And then they're probably going to come back to their North Star and see it through. So, it's kind of a self-correcting apparatus when you have a really strong vision.
Yeah. Yeah. So, especially if you got, I think, going back to, I think, some of the shareholder experience stuff and just sort of like ways that shareholders could be good stewards of sort of the long-term vision of the brand. I think you have strong shareholder pressure there to keep the magic, right? I mean, like there's so much and I think organizations are doing a better job of measuring sort of the brand equity and just sort of the intangible assets that Disney has built over, it's 50, 60 years of doing this stuff really well.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like they don't want to, they can't lose that because that's so much, that's, from a financial standpoint and from a strength standpoint, what they are. Otherwise they just turn into Universal Studios. Like nobody's shocked when Universal like goes back to 4 days a week in the office. Everybody's like, yeah, it makes sense. Kind of.
And this is where it all comes together, right? So go back to Southwest. The question is how many people are pulling for Southwest versus how many people are pulling for Spirit, right?
Right.
So when something goes bad at Southwest, how many people are like, no, I'm pulling for Southwest? Employees.
I want to see somebody like out there.
Customers.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. But also shareholders, right? So all these institutions that buy big chunks of stock and drive up, the stock price, how much more likely is it that they're going to come back to a Southwest Airlines stock, one that they trust and know has performed well over and over, hypothetically, right? Over and over and over again versus, this Spirit fucking Airlines or whatever, right? It's like, they screwed up because they're supposed to screw up. That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Yeah. So you might let in this hypothetical example, you might let the Southwest Airlines stock breathe for a while. But as an investor, they've got a shareholder brand that says, hey, this is consistently a long-term valuable asset because they focus on employee experience, because they focus on customer experience, because they've driven great shareholder experience over the years.
Yeah.
And so people are going to be pulling for Southwest. They might give it a breather, but they're going to come back to it. And honestly, some people are going to say, well, this is a buy opportunity. If other people get scared off from this, this is a buy opportunity.
I feel like their stock has been buoyed significantly just by everybody, like there's lots of institutional investors out there that are like, this is a great time to buy because we believe in this team, we believe in the brand, we know they're going to go back up again. It's like whenever Apple dips or Disney dips or that sort of thing, there's institutional buyers on the other end keeping that stock a little bit higher than it should be because they're like, I believe in the brand, and that has
the shareholder brand too, though.
Shareholder brand, yeah, exactly, and that has good impacts for what the amount of length that organizations have to make changes and make improvements to the employee experience and customer experience because they know that will build that shareholder brand as well. So I think there's all these connections there that I think are really important to mention. I don't want to get too far down the financial rabbit hole. This is for work leaders, but I mean, like I love the connection points here.
Well, there is a connection point, though, with work leaders, too, because, for a long time, HR people getting a seat at the table meant learning how to manage shareholder value.
Sure.
Ironically, the way to manage shareholder value is to invest in employee experience and customer experience.
Yeah,
right?
Do what you do best, right?
Yeah, exactly. Do what you do best, and that drives shareholder value.
Yeah.
But shareholder value became like this, idea that you could manage, stock price by, with smoke and mirrors, and you can't. And, going back to Disney's the same thing because of Disney's powerful experience vision, because of their focus on employee experience and their focus on customer experience. They create a great shareholder experience, and institutional investors are going to bet on that stock and probably load up on it when they face problems because they've got this long history of, reverting back to norm which is create happiness, focus on employee experience, focus on customer experience, that drives shareholder experience.
Yep.
So in short, if you want to create shareholder value, fucking get some scheduling software. Jesus.
You have those foundational basics. Like I always think like, payroll software, like systems of record for core HR, like workforce management, scheduling, like all those things like, oh, do we have to talk about this? Yeah, because if you don't get it right, everything else just kind of like falls apart. You got all these nice like employee experience initiatives, wellness programs, that sort of thing. Doesn't make a difference if you don't know where your employees are. They're not getting paid. They're not getting health benefits. It's like these are all basic things that you have to get right. Like it gives you permission to even talk about this other stuff.
Hey, look at Taco Bell, man. How does Taco Bell compete? Payroll and scheduling.
Yeah. Yeah.
You drive back, you go through the drive-through at Taco Bell. There's a little sticker on the drive-through window that says start today, get paid today, daily pay. Right.
Yeah.
So, they've got their payroll nailed down, but they're also at that next level of offering employee experience driven components of payroll, like earned wage access, which people love, and also scheduling. Really effective scheduling. That's like, if you can schedule and pay well and train well in a quick serve context, you're going to do well. And, a lot of times I'm not going to talk about food quality. Anyway, I'm Brett Starr. He's Lance Hahn. We're from the Star Conspiracy, www.thestarconspiracy.com. I still say the www. I know it's not fashionable anymore, but it's www.thestarconspiracy.com.
World Wide Web. Yes.
World Wide Web. Oh, we should go in the Wayback Machine and
talk about World Wide
Web. Lance, always a pleasure.
Same here, Brett. It's fun. You too, bud.
Look forward to the next one. Let's do it again.
We'll do it.